This is Keys to the Shop, episode 123, and today we're talking about the 10 essentials of a Barista Manual. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Keys to the Shop podcast, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio, and I'm your host for the show. We're really happy to have you along today. Just a really quick encouragement to you to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's iTunes or Stitcher or wherever. And also, if you find the information in these shows helpful, share some episodes with a friend and spread the love. Definitely got a lot of things to choose from, over 150 episodes if you count all of our Thursday shift break episodes. So there's definitely something for you and your colleagues here. Now, today we're going to be talking about something that's so critical for every shop to function well, and it sets up the staff for success right from the beginning in the onboarding process, and that's a quality manual. We all have a manual we're either proud of or we know needs revamping, or maybe we're just starting to write one. But I hope today's episode is going to help you in the process of making a great manual, not just for the sake of the baristas and the people coming on as hourly staff, but also for leadership and ownership. It's just as much for them as it is for the staff. So today we're going to be going over 10 essentials that need to be included, in my opinion, in the Barista Manual to make it really effective and powerful and serve the people in the company well. And now, this show would not be possible without the support of our sponsors, and I want to take the time now to thank them, starting with Prima Coffee. So Prima Coffee is a leading specialty coffee equipment supplier who curates the best equipment from around the world to fit perfectly with the needs of both their enthusiast and professional customers. So whether you're making coffee at home or you're outfitting an entire shop with commercial equipment, they have what you need at Prima Coffee. Helping you succeed in making coffee at home or in the shop is what drives them. So if you're looking for the best equipment and expert assistance to help you get outfitted for whatever your situation is, then look no further than prima-coffee.com. I would encourage you to go there now and check out their holiday buying guide that just got released over on their blog. So go and check them out, prima-coffee.com. And when you check out, be sure to let them know that you heard about them through Keys to the Shop. And thank you so much, Prima, for your support. Now, this show is also brought to you by Pacific Foods. And of course, those are the fine folks behind the Pacific Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages. Whether you're talking about almond, soy, coconut, rice, oat milk, they're designed specifically for professional baristas and the standards for excellence that they demand. So when you use them in the shop, they have the ability to take the heat from steaming, produce an unmatched silky texture, and they keep the flavor balance focused on coffee, which is perfect to include in your menu. Now, it doesn't take much to notice in the industry that Pacific is a huge supporter of specialty coffee and the barista community, and these products are just one of the evidences of that. So I would encourage you, go to pacificfoods.com, reach out to them, get these samples in your store, and see how the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages can really elevate the non-dairy offerings in your cafe. And thank you so much, Pacific, for your support of Keys to the Shop. All right, so we get to dive into barista manuals today, or shop manuals, or however you want to title this, the book of knowledge, that dusty thing that nobody pulls out underneath the espresso machine or gets shoved all the way back behind the trash bags. The state of a lot of our barista manuals starts with a lot of passion and a lot of great intentions, and we just have this brain dump into this book, and we present it to the staff as this tome of knowledge. And what ends up happening oftentimes is it gets used a little bit, but in the shop, a lot of what gets communicated in terms of expectation and details, it's internalized and it's verbal. And you'll notice that after a while of being a barista, you don't technically need to look at a checklist. You can actually just do all of the things you're supposed to do by looking around. Well, that's natural. That's a sign of, a professional in any field. They kind of build an intuition. A manual is not meant to replace intuition. A manual is meant to support it, and it's meant to reflect the changes that happen over the course of years in a business. Now, we've talked about this in other episodes when we talk about checklists, for instance. They're not static. They're not ironclad monoliths that just, have you do things that don't make sense for years. They can change, and so too can a manual. So if you have a 5-year-old store and you haven't edited your manual after you've initially launched it when you first started, if you had a manual at all, then I guarantee you it's high time that you put some edits in there, that you update it and show people that you're serious about having them reference it, because it keeps us all honest, first of all. It is an impartial third-party assessor of performance, which is really critical, especially when things do tend to get heated sometimes in the service industry, where people feel that you're being unfair. You want to have some kind of an impartial judge of performance for yourself and for the staff. And the manual is a great way to do that, because it's just a document that people sign off on, which I recommend upholding. And this is just binding for everybody. Leaders in the cafe oftentimes will hold themselves to a different standard than they hold baristas, because they have so many different things that they are doing. Maybe they work shifts, but they also have to do the schedule, but they also have to do a milk run, but they also have to cover for a sick person, but, it just goes on. And then the excuse is made that you don't have to know the details of what's in the manual as much as the baristas do. When that's exactly the opposite should be true. Because you're the one who has to do the performance reviews, because you're the one who has to be the example to the baristas when you're on bar, baristas live and die oftentimes by the first things they read in these manuals. And then when a manager comes in and does something different because they haven't really had the time, quote unquote, to know and practice and internalize these things, it really gives people an excuse to not follow it. And you don't realize you're doing it until it comes time to give them a review, and then you're saying, well, you're not really following this, that, and the other thing in the manual. And maybe they don't have the courage to tell you, but, it's you. I learned it from watching you. And it's just so true. And a lot of this comes down to the way that managers are sometimes thrust into really hard circumstances by owners who don't support them. That's a whole nother ball of wax. And we definitely have episodes about that, like leadership abandonment syndrome, which is a shift break episode. We'll link to those show notes in that. But back to the manual, okay? With those things in mind, let's go over 10 things that I feel are critical, essential to have in your manual. Now, the first thing is an inspiring about section. Now, the about section could be just a paragraph or so, and that's fine. But what it really needs to have in it is this. It needs to be vision-oriented, maybe some history as well. This is the section to make it communal, about us, not about you necessarily. Here's the vision. Here's the history. Here's how what we're doing benefits the community. Here's how what we're doing will benefit you as a part of the team. You are benefiting this way. Our goal is to be able to benefit our employees in these specific ways. Here's how we want to have an impact on the industry, maybe even the world. And make it a statement and a message about the grand vision. Make it so that people are excited that they chose to work there, because here in this statement about the business, its goals, its vision is something that they can sign on for that's bigger than themselves. It's something that they can really just sink their teeth into and grow into. If it's really boring, if it's something like, we seek to make the best coffee in our town with quality products expert skill and ethical sourcing, then not many people are going to be inspired by that. Right out of the gate, you're kind of boring people. So I would encourage you to go beyond that. Really inspire people in the section about the company and relate it back to how it affects and how it impacts them as an employee, the industry, your community, and maybe the world even. So there's one, the about section. Inspire people. Number 2, I would say that you need to have a job description like the one that you maybe posted, except for you need to have more of a in-depth job description. What does a barista do? What is it that you are responsible for in your role? How does it serve the whole? How does making a latte on Sunday morning benefit the whole? How does it relate back to that vision that you just heard about? Every little section about cash handling, about performing the duties on the checklists, about keeping a clean shop, about having a team spirit or a professional demeanor, all of those critical areas for this job as a barista, they need to be detailed a little bit more in depth in this section. Rather than just a bullet point, give each bullet point 2 or 3 sentences in detail, and always try to connect it back to the values of the company and how it serves the whole. So that's number 2. Have a more in-depth job description that details how the responsibilities and role relates to and serves the whole. Now, number 3, you need to have an org chart with explanations of the roles of management and any other kind of authority in the company. This means you need to think ahead of time who is responsible when it comes time to get the ADT call. You need to think ahead of time. Is it the manager? Is it the owner? Whose numbers are accessed? Who's not responsible for covering 6 shifts and all the details that come up in daily shop life? You need to have those things already figured out. So people coming in need to know who is the owner. What is their responsibility when it comes to communication? When it comes to who I call when the alarm is going off? What about the manager or the GM or the trainer, the shift lead? Whatever authorities you have. If you're a barista coming into a shop, it all kind of just meshes into one entity. And that entity is this. They get paid more than me, and therefore I'm going to ask them. And it's true, because they don't have the authority to deal with particular things like incorrect invoices and getting replacements for items from your supplier, for example. So do they know who to call in these instances? This is a perfect place to detail those things, okay? And that's the first thing in this section that you need to detail is who are the authorities in the shop, and what do those roles do? How do they relate to the barista role in terms of practical communications? So the second thing to include under this title of org chart, where as you just described the practical implications and communications of each role in the cafe and who they are, what they're responsible for, things like that, there's one more responsibility that needs to be detailed here, and that is the responsibility of the leaders to the staff. This is kind of setting up the situation to be more like, here's how we as leaders, because if you're giving people a manual, likely you're a leader, right? Here's how we are going to serve you. Now, if you haven't listened to episode 67, 6 Truths About Power, I would encourage you to do so. It's basically about the responsible use of authority in the cafe. And there's a lot more than just one episode that can be said about that. But suffice it to say, people come into a situation where there's lots of different authorities around them with some trepidation. Of course, most of us have been burned by bad authority in the past. So this is a great section to detail what you are not there to do. You're not there to lord it over them. You're not there to be exempt from the rules of a cafe. You are there to be an example. You are there to create a space that equips them, that challenges them, that supports them, that creates a safe work environment for everybody. There are so many things that you can include in this section, but this is not an opportunity to give your expectations of them. This is an opportunity to give them your expectations of yourself to them. And I definitely would love to see that in a barista manual because it answers a lot of questions that baristas have in their heads that they don't say out loud ahead of time. And it sets them up to be able to trust the people that they're working for more. So that's number 3. Now, let's go to number 4. This is where we really get down to the nitty-gritty, and this is policy and procedures. Everything that you have to do in the cafe needs to have some kind of writing behind it, and it needs to be accessible to the baristas, and I would say that the manual is a great place to put this. Okay? Policy and procedures relates to things like what is the discount that you get on brewing equipment, for example, as a policy. What is our policy on refills? What is our policy on people not buying anything but taking up the Wi-Fi? What is our policy about dogs in the cafe? Any question that people have about what should we do when, fill in the blank, is a policy question. These are all about contingencies. What if, what if, what if? If you've been in business for any length of time, your staff probably have a list of more than 20 what if questions that they haven't yet asked you. This is an opportunity to go, if you don't have this in your manual, go and put this in there, but mine your staff for feedback. Because again, chances are they've been holding on to this question. Like, I don't know. I just do my best, right? So anything related to these what if or what do we do when questions should be in this section and detailed exactly how you would want it to be performed or how you want people to represent your brand. Now, there is another thing that you need to have in here, and of course, that's SOPs, Standard Operating Procedures. And we definitely have some material on SOPs in this podcast. In fact, I'm actually giving a talk about Standard Operating Procedures at Coffee Fest next year. So if you're going to New York City Coffee Fest, that is the first time I'll be giving this talk on Standard Operating Procedures, but I digress. Here in the policies and procedures sections needs to live all of the how do you make the vanilla sauce? How do you sweep the floor? What is the standard operating procedure for any task that people are given to do as part of their job? We need to know how to do it. That's how we succeed. I can't be satisfied in my job if I haven't been given clear instructions by my leaders with supporting documentation. It's hard to remember all these things if I don't have it written down somewhere. Okay? So, SOPs, policies, go in this section. Make it very robust and intuitive and clear. Number 5 is pretty much policy and procedure for drinks, and that's drinks and preparation. Your quality control for all of your espresso beverages, for all of your food items. This includes recipes, procedures for workflow of making iced drinks, workflow of putting sauce in cups, and how and when to stir the sauce, how to put the cap on so that the sipping hole is on the other side of the seam so it doesn't leak, and down to those types of details. And that might seem silly. Actually, I had a customer just rave about how we always put the sipping hole of the coffee cup on the other side of the seam, and that she loves that little detail. Don't underestimate those details. Put them in writing. This section on drinks and how to prepare them is probably the section that baristas are going to visit the most. So not only should you include recipes and procedures and workflows for the bar, but you should also take the opportunity, because of their gravitation towards this area, to relate those things back to the original vision and back to the whole. Infuse this document with a common thread of vision and mission. That's my recommendation to you. So when you are looking at drinks and preparation, one of the things that you need to have in the drinks and prep that I don't see very many people doing, we talked about in the cash register hero episode, that was last week's episode, you need to have screenshots and printouts of the actual POS system that you're using so that people can have a reference to study. All of the different modifiers, it's not enough to have people hack it out at the register and try to remember it when they get home. Just print it out. Just do the screenshots and print it out, put it in the manual, and keep it updated. Very, very important. So again, drinks and recipes and preparation, number 5 on the list of what to include in your manual. Now, number 6 is a section on checklists. So checklists are all of the different morning, mid-shift, night, events, any type of checklist that you happen to have in the store, depending on how widespread or varied your operations are, need to live in a checklist section. And it's important that it not live in the policy and procedures section. The reason is because technically, I guess you could say that they are related, but it will get buried in that section. It's hard to just thumb through a huge section. So breaking it apart is really helpful. And these are really bullet points. They're not necessarily SOPs. Now, maybe a part of your checklist can be related to an SOP. In a checklist episode we did a while back, we talked about how a checklist can refer you to a standard operating procedure. And again, as you internalize your job, you might memorize the standard operating procedure for mopping the bathroom. As an example, maybe the checklist says, mop the bathroom, and it has an asterisk next to it. Now, a barista is trained to know that the asterisk means there's an SOP in reference. So what's the SOP for mopping the bathroom? Maybe for you, it's clean up the mop after you're done mopping the bathrooms, then with fresh water, mop the shop, right? If that's a detail that you have and you train people well, what they'll be able to do is they'll see that checklist and they'll say, oh, I know what to do. This is the bathroom cleaning thing. Here's what the SOP says, and I will be able to be on my way. So a checklist is really just a bullet point list of things that act like bumpers on a bowling lane. You're going to hit a pin. You're going to have a good close. You're going to have a great open if you accomplish this list of things, right? You can be somewhat wordy, but brief enough that it's easy to just glance at and know that you have or have not done those things. And those checklists, all of them, however many you have in the shop, need to live in this section so that those who are given manuals can study them. All right, so now let's talk about number 7, and that is the section on hospitality. Now, this is a section where you get to detail your values as it relates to hospitality and welcoming guests into your cafe, and what kind of an experience you want them to have. You can just describe in detail how you want them to be greeted at the door. Customers should feel at ease. They should be helped. We are there for them and their enjoyment. We're not there to try to upsell them on a ton of different things. We want to be genuine at the register. There's a lot of things that we can detail here, and some of it might be a repeat of your policies and procedures, right? For example, do customers bust their own tables? Or do we do that for them? That's something you probably will have in the policies and procedures section, but if you have to repeat it, then fine. Repeating yourself is fine. It reinforces a standard, and it's helpful because it shows that there's a particular level of importance placed on this because it relates to something so critical, in this case, the customer having a great experience in your shop. So in the hospitality section, you can build out what the ideal experience looks like. For example, from the time they walk in the shop to the time they walk out the door. What are we doing? What are they doing? What are they experiencing? How are we able to facilitate the best possible experience in the shop? So every manual needs to have this type of hospitality section, And of course, because the customer is so important. I say that almost like, do we need to say the customer is so important? We wouldn't have a business without them. And this manual, the whole thing, is meant to not just serve the needs of the business and the staff, but also to create a consistently excellent experience for the customer. Now, number 8 on the list is a section on dealing with harassment in the workplace. Now, this is something, of course, we in coffee, specialty coffee, in the last year have been especially attuned to. It's been going on for a long time, whether at the hands of customers or coworkers or bosses. But it's something that is, unfortunately, not very well addressed in print or verbally. It's appropriate that we talk about this after talking so much about serving the needs of staff and customers. One of the greatest needs that we have is to know that when things get ugly in the cafe, that the company has our back, not just in lip service, but with actual step-by-step procedures to follow when it comes to workplace harassment, both from customers and from coworkers. Coworkers who feel like they are close enough to be able to engage in abusive behavior of any kind. What constitutes abusive behavior in your cafe? Exactly. And detail it. People need to know ahead of time that you will not tolerate sexism or racism or discrimination based on sexual orientation or whatever it is that you are likely to be subjected to abuse from. You need to know what steps you can take, because when you're in service, oftentimes you're trained to be sort of able to take it. And that's what people who are abusive look for. Somebody who they think will take it. So having outlined in your manual a way not only to identify this behavior, but to know and say, hey, look, you don't need to take this just because you think that you're supposed to serve this person and the customer's always right and other BS like that. You don't. And here are exact steps that you need to take. You can tell them to stop. You can call a manager. You can call the owner. All of these things. So what does that look like for your company? I feel you definitely need to have this in your manual because it's a real part of the job. Now, in this section, you can also include how to deal with somebody who is being abusive generally to the customer base. If that's a drunk person or somebody who's being violent, these are different types of abusive behaviors. These are people harassing customers, for example, generally. So again, include in your manual a section on harassment. What steps to take when it's coworkers? What steps to take when it is customers? Let them know that you have their back, who to call, and also what to do when you have to step in for customers, when it's somebody who's harassing customers in the cafe, for whatever reason. If you don't outline these things in the manual, then people are going to feel that leadership just does not care about the realities of service work. And this is definitely one of the shameful realities of it. So that section, very important. So number 9 is the FAQ, frequently asked questions. Every customer comes into a cafe with a different set of assumptions and history when it comes to what type of coffee experiences they've had. So your set of frequently asked questions is going to be unique based on your customer base, which means you need to be in tune with the questions that keep recurring. When new baristas come on, they need to know how to handle these questions. They need to know what those answers are. So take an audit of these questions in all of the locations of your cafe and email your baristas and say, hey, what are the questions that you most frequently have customers asking about the brand, about our history, about our products, the calorie count of that latte, whatever it is. If it comes up a lot, put it in that section. Put it in the frequently asked section. It's remarkable how effective having this in the manual is, because it empowers us as baristas to actually have an answer for these questions that satisfy not just the customer, but also we know we are speaking on the behalf of the entire company. And that's a really empowering feeling. And now we come to number 10 on the list, and that is coffee education and information. Now, this ranges anywhere from the description of the whole bean coffees and information about the farms and varieties of coffee that you carry, to the tasting notes that you want people to be able to identify in the espresso. You can talk about different aspects of the coffee industry that you want people to know about in your shop and be knowledgeable about the science and the craft of coffee. So this is basically the section where you get to geek out on coffee and use this as kind of an in-house reference guide for all things coffee info and data related. You can go over extraction science, agricultural science, whatever, These are all things that you should probably include. All the things that factor into a quality cup of coffee should be included in this coffee section. And there's so many great resources to get information from and be able to put into your manual, excerpts from books and articles and blogs. So I would encourage you, definitely make this a section that you keep adding to, but make sure that it's not just information for information's sake. Make sure it's something that you can give people that will be able to be used on bar, that maybe is really essential for them understanding why you use the recipe you do to extract out of that 21-gram basket versus a 17-gram basket, for example. Why do you brew at a 16-to-1 ratio versus a 15-to-1 ratio in the batch brewer? There's lots of different things you can include here. You definitely want to include a coffee information and science section in your manual. So to review, first, a compelling and inspiring about section. Second, a detailed job description outlining how that job and role relates to the entire company and the vision of the company. 3, explain the roles of authority and management, both in terms of what their responsibilities are for operations and also what their responsibilities are for serving the needs of the staff. Number 4 is a section on policies and procedures in the cafe. This is where your standard operating procedures live and your policies on different behaviors and what-if scenarios in the shop live. Number 5 is drinks and preparations. So all the recipes, workflows, how-tos, step-by-step instructions, all of that needs to be put into that section. Number 6, checklists. All checklists, opening, mid, close, etc., need to be put here. Number 7, hospitality. What is your vision for hospitality? What does the ideal visit look like? Really take the time to emphasize this importance as a cornerstone of your business. Number 8, you need to have a detailed plan of action and statement of absolute support for your employees against harassment and abusive behavior in the workplace, whether it comes from customers or from coworkers. You also need to equip them with what to do when people are being abusive in the cafe to customers. There are frequently asked questions in your cafe, and a lot of them are just unique because your customer base is unique. Just put those into this manual so that baristas have the answers before the questions are asked. It's especially helpful for new baristas. And then finally, number 10, the coffee information and coffee science section of your manual. Very important to have that as well. So there are definitely more things to put in a manual. And when you give out your manual, when you finally have it finished, it's going to feel so great to have it finished. But the real hard part is being able to apply this consistently across the entire company, have people sign off on it. It's just a codification of things that we have been doing, some of the things that we are going to start doing. Here are the things we are all holding each other accountable for. This is, for a lot of people, a big step. So you need to give people grace as you implement these things in the cafe. Let this document be a servant to the culture, not shackles. Don't make this a tool to lord it over people. Make this a tool that facilitates everybody's success. And I wish you the best in your journey in creating a really great barista manual. So if you want the show notes for this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com, and there you can sign up for the newsletter, where every other week you will get the show notes for each episode, along with interesting links of things that will help you in your career. You'll also get updates about what's going on with Keys to the Shop and speaking and consulting, things like that. The show notes are really important because they allow you to see a recap of the main points made in each episode, and it's a great reference tool to apply it to your cafe. Think of it like a little mini manual, actually, for each episode. So again, keystotheshop.com, sign up on the sidebar there, put your email address in, and it's as easy as that. If you want to get in contact with me for any reason, you can do so by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com. I'd love to hear your feedback or any questions that you have for me about coffee or about the show. If you are interested in working with Keys to the Shop Consulting to help develop things like a manual for your shop or improve operations or coffee quality, then again, chris@keystotheshop.com. Let's schedule a call and explore what you need in your cafe or your career. I'd be honored to help you in that journey. So thank you very much for joining me again. I hope that this was a helpful guide for this process of creating a manual. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.